We are kicking off with NXT as Frankie, Kazarian, and Joe Hendry of TNA competed in the match, with Hendry being given a chance to cut a promo before the bell rung. Despite never appearing for WWE before, Hendry received arguably the biggest pop of the night in the Performance Center, a sign of just how popular he's become with his TNA work. Fans can expect to see more of Hendry in NXT, as Fightful Select reports that he is expected to make additional appearances for the Gold brand in the future. Officials in NXT were pleased with the reaction Hendry garnered, and sources connected to TNA were also satisfied that his storyline with Kazarian continued on NXT. That said, some wished that Hendry had more time to shine in the match, as despite the pop during his entrance and his promo, he was among the first talents eliminated. In footage shared online, though, Hendry was seen arguing with Shawn Michaels, and between this tease and the report, expect to see more of Joe Hendry in WWE NXT very soon. Are you excited to see Joe Hendry working more with WWE? And would you like to see him potentially join full-time? Or is he doing better in TNA and across indie promotions? As we saw in this week's Raw, the Wyatt Sicks laid to waste several superstars during their debut, and Chad Gable was one of the many talents attacked backstage. The Alpha Academy leader was seen bloody and lying unconscious right next to Uncle Howdy, but this attack on the former Olympian was anything but random. WWE had actually foreshadowed Gable being targeted by Howdy, as his initials appeared in one of the teasers for the group, and a notable line from a video teased an attack on Gable. One video had the phrase, "You changed, you stopped saying thank you," which many believe is a nod to Gable no longer saying thank you as a part of his current heel character. The teasers hinted that Gable would be targeted due to changes in his behavior, and his failure to rectify these actions appears to have led to the attack. Gable was one of the many to fall victim to the Wyatt Sicks, but who do you think should be next, and what storylines should the group avoid? Let us know in the comments below. More from the Wyatt Sicks faction now, as after a successful debut on this week's Raw, the pressure is on for WWE's booking team to continue with this momentum. According to a recent report from PW Torch, WWE are currently preparing a detailed storyboard on what's next for the group, which is said to include who will be the next victim. With that said, reaching a consensus about what's next is proving easier said than done, as Wade Keller from PW Torch reports that Triple H has shot down several ideas already. The chief content officer is also said to be, quote, furious with the way creative came up with this plan, and there are questions about where exactly the faction will end up. Additionally, members of the creative team are not on the same page when it comes to deciding whether the group will remain on Raw or also appear on SmackDown. Wade Keller reports that Triple H wants the faction to take over SmackDown, but the creative is of the opinion that too much TV presence will result in diminishing interest in the group. It's hard not to see why they think this, as shortly before the Raw debut, many had felt the QR code teases had become too played out, and interest in the cryptic messages had become waning. Ultimately, no decision has been taken as of yet, and we need to wait until Friday night to see what might happen with the Wyatt Sicks faction. Do you think the group should make their presence felt on SmackDown? Or would the group terrorizing both main roster brands be too much too soon? Give your thoughts in the comments. On this week's Raw, Ludwig Kaiser attacked Sheamus, and an attempt to do further damage was thwarted as he was cut off with a hellacious spear by Braun Breaker. WWE caught this meeting of Kaiser and Breaker beautifully, and it again showed the scary speed of Braun for a man his size, and WWE made a lot of effort to make this work. WWE sources noted that the spear spot was planned throughout the day before Raw began, and Fightful Select adds that WWE officials were happy with the camera shot that caught the move. WWE officials and fans have praised Sheamus and Kaiser for their program, with Breaker's main roster dominance also being well received in feuds with Ricochet and Ilya Dragunov. Braun's speed has been so much that it's allegedly forced production changes, and going off this week's Raw, fans can expect plenty more big programs in the future of Braun Breaker. Over to AEW Dynamite now, as Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland continue their feud ahead of their AEW World Championship match for later this month at Forbidden Door. During the pair's war of words this week, Ospreay dropped a WWE reference in regards to Strickland, stating that, "Well, you had a hit row, I had a hit list." This was in reference to the group Swerve was once part of, which included Top Dollar, B-Fab, and Ashanti the Adonis, and the faction struggled twice on WWE's main roster. While the faction was floundering on SmackDown, Ospreay was competing against some of the biggest names in the industry, a fact the international champion hasn't forgotten. The segment ended with escalated tensions as Swerve Strickland decided to make matters personal with Will Ospreay by bringing up his children, infuriating the aerial assassin. We all know how personal Swerve can get, as he invaded the home of Hangman Page during their feud, and this gives Ospreay another reason to decimate him at Forbidden Door. But what did you make of this segment? Do you think AEW is doing the right thing by bringing up WWE references more often? Let us know down below. Ever since MJF returned to AEW, Russo has had a vendetta against him, and the pair had a verbal back and forth last week that quickly escalated to blows. With that in mind, a match between them opened this week's Dynamite, and fans were thrilled to see MJF back in the ring in his first match since World's End last December. An exceptional match came to an end with MJF hitting his finisher to get the pinfall, but after the match, MJF was confronted by Brian Cage and his crew on the Titantron. Cage announced that his ally, CMLL's Hechicero, wishes to battle MJF at Forbidden Door, and the Salt of the Earth was surprised, but still pumped up for the potential showdown. MJF is quickly getting back in the swing of things as an AEW talent, and fans can expect a potential show stealer at Forbidden Door when he takes on the CMLL star. This week's show saw the announcement of the Owen Hart tournament brackets, and fans can expect a former IWGP World Heavyweight Champ in action. Shortly before Dynamite, it was reported that Shingo Takagi had been spotted backstage at Dynamite, and his name was among those announced for the men's tournament. Takagi will be joined by top names in the tournament, including Bryan Danielson, Jay White, Jeff Jarrett, Rey Fenix, and a wildcard entrant yet to be revealed. One name Takagi won't have to deal with is Claudio Castagnoli, as he was eliminated from the tournament by Pac on this week's Dynamite in the first round. Instead, Takagi will have to face Bryan Danielson in his opening round match on next week's episode of Dynamite, which will hardly be an easy take for the Japanese star. For the women, Willow Nightingale, Serena Deeb, Nyla Rose, and Kris Statlander make up one side of the brackets, and Saraya, Mariah May, Hikaru Shida, and Deonna Purrazzo are the other. This year's tournaments are extra special, as the winners will earn world title matches at AEW All In. And who do you think should win these tournaments? Sound off in the comments. On this week's NXT, Javon Evans competed twice on the show, first by winning the opening Battle Royal, and later against Ethan Page, who was also in his second match. NXT went off the air with a fight between Paige and Trick Williams, which Shawn Spears got involved in, and a double cutter off the top rope by Evans left all four men laid out. This led to an incredible shot of all four men with the NXT Championship in the center, and Fightful Select reports that Evans was praised for his camera awareness. It was this awareness that allowed for the closing shot of NXT to happen, and it certainly made for a striking visual and a tease of a four-way match for the title. Evans has only been on WWE NXT TV for a short time, but has impressed greatly since then, and his camera smarts will only bode well for him in the future. But what do you make of the closing moments of NXT and this final shot? If a four-way match is planned, who should walk away with the NXT title? Give your predictions in the comments. Since WrestleMania 40, Solo Sikoa has been running the bloodline in Roman Reigns' absence, but some of Sikoa's decisions have seemed at odds with the tribal chief. For example, Sikoa has ousted Jimmy Uso from the bloodline and has brought in Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, additions that Reigns' wise man Paul Heyman has hardly been on board with. Many expect that Reigns and Sikoa will feud over the bloodline when the time is right, and this week, Roman teased conflict with his cousin by unfollowing Sikoa on social media. Right now, there's no word on when Roman Reigns will be back, but until then, Sikoa will do what he wants with the bloodline, in spite of what the head of the table has already built. A feud between the two would be huge for Sikoa, who already holds a victory over John Cena, and a victory over his cousin would immediately put Solo into championship contention. What are your thoughts on Roman Reigns following Solo Sikoa on social media amidst his WWE hiatus? Is a future feud on the horizon for them? Sound off in the comments. During last week's AEW Collision, Buddy Matthews had to exit a trios match early after suffering what many suspected was a serious knee injury. Later in the show, Matthews was attacked by the Patriarchy, which left some to question whether this was a real injury or just one done to get him backstage on his own. In an update from Fightful Select, it said that this spot wasn't a botch, but was planned, and we'll have to see when Matthews shows up next on TV. In the meantime, the patriarchy will have the numbers advantage over the House of Black as Christian Cage and his faction seek to take out their opponents for good. When WCW signed Vince Russo in late 1999, it was to serve as a writer following his success with the WWE's Attitude Era, but it wasn't long before Russo was a regular on TV. In 2000, Russo would even have a brief reign as WCW World Heavyweight Champion, and this, among other booking ideas, guaranteed boos from the waning WCW fanbase. Speaking on Vice's Who Killed WCW, Russo spoke about being an on-screen character for the company and had some choice words when comparing himself to others in WCW at the time. "I'm just gonna be 1000% completely honest with you. As far as an on-screen character, I felt that I was better than 80% of that roster," Russo boldly claimed. The criticism Russo faces is often due to him booking himself onto the show and putting the WCW World Championship around his own waist. However, he explained that happened on the receiving end of a ton of pressure. "I made the mistake of saying, you know what, F it, if you want ratings, I'll go out there and get the ratings myself. I almost got killed, bro. I almost got killed." Russo acknowledged that much of the animosity towards him today stems from the belief that he embodied the character he portrayed on screen, but he did have some regrets. Russo regretted an incident where he was taking a beating from Goldberg, and Goldberg didn't do as Vince had requested, despite Russo telling him he had a concussion. Ultimately, Russo's efforts were not enough to save WCW, which was already struggling by the time he joined, and we wonder what would have been had he stayed behind the camera. Do you think Russo did too much on WCW TV, or was the fact that fans genuinely hated him enough to warrant having him be a heel on the show? Let us know down below. More from NXT, and like we said, Frankie Kazarian continued his TNA feud with Joe Hendry on this week's show, and had some choice words for the Scottish star after the Battle Royal. In a backstage promo at NXT, but shared by TNA, Kazarian blasted Hendry as a one-trick pony who stole his thunder, before pointing out that it was he who took Hendry out of the match. Kazarian went as far as to say that if not for Hendry showing up and throwing him off his game, he would have won the Battle Royal and would have gone on to become NXT champion. Declaring Hendry an obstacle everywhere I go, Kaz made clear that his feud with Hendry is far from over, and it could seemingly take place on TNA programming, as well as WWE NXT. Back to AEW Dynamite now, and the Acclaimed earned a huge victory on this week's show, as they won a championship eliminator against the World Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks. This guarantees Max Caster and Anthony Bowens a future title match, but the real story is what happened between the Bucks during the closing moments of the match. The match ended with Nick Jackson accidentally striking Matt with the belt, which left him isolated in the ring, and the Acclaimed got the win with the mic drop. This win comes 4 years after the Acclaimed failed to get the better of the Bucks, and now they have a shot at the gold in what'll be the Bucks' first title defense in months. This week's match was created by Christopher Daniels, who has his own issues with the Elite, and the Bucks will be looking to avoid a similar mistake when the titles are on the line. We mentioned that the Acclaimed have earned themselves a World Tag Team title match with the Young Bucks, but their entrance for this week's bout was far different than normal. Typically, Max Caster will deliver some freestyle barbs that have got him in hot water on more than one occasion, but that wasn't the case this time. As Caster came out to start his rap, his microphone was cut off, and the Bucks started to laugh as Kazuchika Okada appeared on the Titantron, diddling with some buttons. The Continental Champion cut off Caster's mic, and this distraction allowed the Bucks to ambush their opponents for the early advantage. Obviously, the Acclaimed were able to turn the tide, and they'll have to be mindful for any other tricks the Bucks may have up their sleeves when the two teams next face off. Dynamite also saw a confrontation of Mariah May, Mina Shirakawa, and Toni Storm, in which it was made clear that May would have to choose between her friend and her mentor. Before May could give an answer, Saraya and Harley Cameron interrupted, with Saraya making clear she is sick of the three women, setting up a six-woman brawl. We say it was a six-woman brawl as Anna Jay ambushed Mina Shirakawa from behind and sent her into the ring post, while Saraya and Cameron took on May and Storm. Storm was able to regain control thanks to using her shoe as a weapon, but her attempt at a hip attack on Saraya resulted in the Timeless One going through a table. As for Mariah May and Mina, they retreated to the top of the ramp, and we're sure this isn't the last we've seen of these six women together following this week's brawl. In Jeff Hardy's final match at AEW, the veteran suffered a broken nose during his bout with Sammy Guevara, and at the time, some feared he'd suffered a concussion. That thankfully wasn't the case, but this broken nose injury is still a major issue, and when speaking to Muscleman Malcolm, Jeff said he's cleared to wrestle with a broken nose mask. Jeff made a triumphant return to TNA during Against All Odds, but isn't under contract, and we'll have to see when he next wrestles, but if it's soon, he'll have to wear his protective face mask. It was earlier this year Matt Hardy returned to TNA Wrestling after his AEW deal expired. Now that Jeff has joined him, fans are eager to see what's to come. While neither man is under an official contract, expectations are high for the legendary brothers in TNA, especially after what many consider a lackluster run in AEW. On Busted Open Radio, Matt shared his excitement about Jeff's return and their future in TNA, and believes they will receive their proverbial flowers in the company. He said, "Whenever the match ended and the system jumped everybody, leaving us down and out, the iconic Hardy Boys music hit, and Jeff Hardy appeared to have my back. The Hardy Boys have reunited once and for all in TNA. It's very exciting because I believe in TNA, the Hardy Boys can get the run that we deserve at this stage in our career, and that is the run to cement our legacy. That is very important to both of us. We're both happy now that we are somewhere else where we feel like we'll get utilized and optimized in our status as legends as we are, legends who can still go." Both Matt and Jeff have had championship success in TNA, as single stars and as a tag team, so it's no wonder why Matt feels that this run will give them the run they deserve. Compare this to AEW, where neither man held any championships, and we'll just have to see if the Hardys get the run they're hoping for now that they're back in TNA. More from the Owen Hart Cup as this week's Dynamite saw Kris Statlander defeat Nyla Rose to advance to the next round of the women's brackets. Following the bout, Kris and Stokely Hathaway berated their former friend Willow Nightingale, who appeared on the Titantron, and reminded them both that she is also in the tournament. In her first round match, Nightingale will face Serena Deeb, with the winner advancing to the match with Statlander, which could be quite the grudge match between herself and Willow. The other first round matches will see Deonna Purrazzo take on Hikaru Shida, while Mariah May faces Saraya, and we'll have to wait to see who advances in this tournament. We've got some concerning news regarding NXT's Saquon Shugars, who is currently out of action due to an injury and needs some help with his funders. This week, Shugars took to Twitter to ask for help with his GoFundMe, stating that he had broke his knee off during a match and is frustrated Shawn Michaels won't let him wrestle. Shugars proposed the idea of being wheeled out like Ron White, but indicated that Michaels and Matt Bloom were not receptive to the suggestion and included a link to his GoFundMe. Shugars hasn't competed since the March 19th Level Up, where he lost to Tyvon Heights, and this was only his fourth match since signing with WWE in late 2023. Shugars, who as his sign said will bump for food, has raised over $400 so far, and we're hoping for a speedy recovery for the talented NXT superstar. In 8-man tag team action on Dynamite, Kyle O'Reilly, Orange Cassidy, Mark Briscoe, and Dante Martin got a win over Roderick Strong, Kyle Fletcher, Zack Sabre Jr., and Konosuke Takeshita. Cassidy was able to seal the deal for his team when he hit an orange punch on Strong, and Jack Perry showed up to take out Dante, while Cassidy and Sabre had a standoff in the ring. Daniel Garcia took on Rhett Titus from ROH in a quick match that saw Red Death score a squash victory that only reminded fans that Garcia is somebody to keep an eye on. And we're ending today with AEW, as the company will return to London for its next All-In event, but for the first time ever, Dynamite and Collision will also take place in the UK. On August 21st, Dynamite and a taping of Collision will take place at the Utilita Arena in Cardiff, Wales, and expect tickets to fly out when they go on sale next Wednesday.